I never imagined my own daughter could be trapped in such a nightmare. As I watched Alara's husband, Bennett, walk out the door with his suitcase, something felt deeply unsettling. His abrupt announcement of a business trip for several months didn't sit right with me. Alara's reaction raised alarm bells. Her usual warm smile was replaced by a fearful expression, her eyes darting around nervously. Even after Bennett left, she seemed on edge, jumping at the slightest noise. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" I asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She flinched, then forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a little stressed about Bennett being away for so long." But her words didn't match the terror in her eyes. Over the next few days, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. She would jump when her phone rang, and she avoided my questions about Bennett's whereabouts. One evening, as I was leaving her house, I noticed her phone lighting up with an unknown number. She quickly declined the call, her face paling. "Alara, who was that?" I pressed, concern etching my voice. "Just a wrong number," she mumbled, refusing to meet my gaze. That night, I couldn't sleep. My motherly instincts were screaming that something was terribly wrong. I knew Alara was hiding something, and it had to do with Bennett's sudden trip. The next morning, I confided my fears to my husband, Ronald. "We need to investigate this further. Something isn't right." Ronald nodded grimly. "I've had my suspicions about Bennett for a while now. Let's start digging." We began piecing together the inconsistencies in Bennett's story. His supposed business trip didn't align with his work schedule, and his colleagues seemed unaware of any extended travel plans. With each clue we uncovered, my dread deepened. What had my sweet Alara become entangled in? And how could we protect her from whatever darkness had ensnared her? With our suspicions mounting, Ronald and I knew we needed to confront Alara directly. We couldn't stand idly by while she potentially suffered at the hands of her husband. The next day, we showed up unannounced at her doorstep. Alara's eyes widened in surprise when she opened the door. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" "We're worried about you, sweetheart," I said gently, studying her face for any signs of distress. She attempted a reassuring smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "There's no need to worry. Everything is fine." Ronald stepped forward, his expression stern. "Alara, we know something isn't right with Bennett's supposed business trip. We've done our research, and his story doesn't add up." Alara's facade crumbled, and she glanced around nervously. "Please, come inside." Once we were settled in her living room, the floodgates opened. "I can't keep lying to you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Bennett hasn't been himself lately. He's become aggressive, constantly accusing me of things I haven't done." My heart shattered at the sight of my daughter's anguish. "Has he hurt you?" I demanded, barely containing my rage. Alara shook her head quickly. "Not physically, but his words cut deeper than any blow. He's threatened to take Theo away from me if I don't do exactly as he says." Ronald's fists clenched at the mention of our grandson. "That's it. We're calling the police right now." But Alara gripped his arm, her eyes pleading. "No, please. You don't understand what he's capable of. He'll make sure I never see Theo again." In that moment, I saw the depth of her fear, and it chilled me to the bone. How had we let things spiral so far? How could we have been so blind to the monster Bennett had become? "We'll get through this together," I promised, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "No one is going to hurt you or Theo, not on my watch." As Alara sobbed into my shoulder, I exchanged a determined look with Ronald. We would stop at nothing to protect our family, no matter the cost. The next few days were a whirlwind of strategizing and gathering evidence. We knew we needed undeniable proof of Bennett's true nature to have any chance of freeing Alara from his clutches. Despite Alara's initial hesitation, we managed to convince her to let us install hidden cameras throughout the house. Ronald handled the technical aspects while I focused on providing Alara with the emotional support she desperately needed. Bennett's return from his supposed business trip was looming, and we knew we had to be prepared. As much as it pained me to think of my daughter enduring his abuse, we needed to capture his behavior on camera. The day he walked through the door, the tension in the air was palpable. Alara greeted him with a forced smile, her eyes darting towards the hidden cameras, seeking reassurance. Bennett's demeanor was cold, almost predatory. "Where's Theo?" he demanded, his voice laced with menace. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to intervene. We needed solid evidence, no matter how difficult it was to witness. As the night wore on, Bennett's true colors emerged. The cameras captured every explosive outburst, every cruel accusation, and every veiled threat. With each passing moment, my rage towards this man who had tormented my daughter only grew. But through it all, Alara remained strong, her love for Theo giving her the courage to endure. And we were there, watching, gathering the ammunition we needed to bring Bennett's reign of terror to an end once and for all. The hidden cameras provided the evidence we needed, but it wasn't enough. We needed to understand the root of Bennett's behavior, the catalyst that had transformed him into a monster. Ronald and I decided to dig deeper into his past. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. Bennett had been hiding a dangerous gambling addiction and was drowning in debt. The business trips were nothing more than lies to cover up his spiraling losses. Armed with this knowledge, we confronted Alara. At first, she was reluctant to admit the truth, still clinging to the hope that her husband could change. But as we presented the financial records and proof of his deceit, the reality became impossible to ignore. "He's been threatening me for months," she finally confessed, her voice trembling. "Every time I questioned his absences or the strange purchases, he would fly into a rage. He said if I ever tried to leave or expose him, he'd make sure I never saw Theo again." Tears streamed down her face as she recounted the horrific details of Bennett's manipulation and abuse. My heart broke for her, but a fierce determination burned within me. No one would threaten my daughter and grandson without facing the consequences. With Alara's cooperation, we were able to piece together a timeline of Bennett's gambling escapades and the mounting debts he had accrued. The evidence was damning, but we knew it wouldn't be enough to convince the authorities. We needed to catch him in the act. Ronald and I devised a plan to lure Bennett into a situation where his true colors would be exposed. We arranged for a private meeting under the guise of discussing a business opportunity, secretly recording the entire conversation. Bennett arrived, his demeanor oozing arrogance and a false sense of superiority. He launched into a practiced spiel about a surefire investment opportunity, his eyes gleaming with greed. But we were prepared. With a few carefully crafted questions, we steered the conversation towards his mounting debts and the threats he had made against Alara and Theo. The transformation was chilling. Bennett's charming facade crumbled, replaced by a snarling, vicious creature consumed by rage and desperation. The threats and insults spewed from his lips like venom, each word more vile than the last. Through it all, the recorder captured every damning syllable, every incriminating outburst. As the meeting concluded, Bennett stormed out, oblivious to the fact that he had sealed his own fate. With the evidence secured, we knew it was time to strike. We contacted a trusted family lawyer, presenting the recordings and financial records. The lawyer's expression hardened as he listened, his jaw clenched with righteous fury. "This is more than enough to build a solid case against him," he assured us. "We'll make sure he pays for what he's done, and we'll protect Alara and her son at all costs." A weight lifted from my shoulders, and I allowed myself a small smile. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but we were finally on the path to justice. Bennett's reign of terror was about to come to an end, and my family would be safe at last. As I embraced Alara, her tears mingled with mine, tears of relief, tears of hope, and tears of determination. We had faced the darkness together, and we would emerge victorious, no matter what challenges lay ahead. With the evidence gathered and our family lawyer on board, a renewed sense of determination coursed through me. For too long, Bennett had held my daughter and grandson hostage with his threats and abuse. It was time to take back control and ensure their safety once and for all. I sat Alara down, steeling myself for the difficult conversation ahead. "Sweetheart, we have everything we need to take Bennett down, but we need your cooperation." Her eyes widened, a flicker of hope mixed with trepidation. "What do you need me to do?" "We need to get him to incriminate himself on camera," I explained gently. "It's the only way to guarantee the authorities will have no choice but to act." Alara's face paled, and she wrapped her arms around herself protectively. "You want me to provoke him? Mom, you don't understand how dangerous he can be." I reached out and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we'll be right there with you every step of the way." We've got a plan, and we'll make sure you and Theo are safe, no matter what." She searched my face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, she took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay. For Theo, I'll do whatever it takes." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Ronald handled the technical aspects, setting up hidden cameras and microphones throughout the house. Meanwhile, I worked with Alara, coaching her on how to subtly provoke Bennett into revealing his true nature. "Remember, we need him to make threats or admit to his gambling and debts," I reminded her. "Stay calm and don't let him see how much he's getting to you." Alara nodded, her jaw set in determination. I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride at her resilience in the face of such adversity. The day of the confrontation arrived, and the tension was palpable. Bennett arrived home, his usual arrogant swagger in full display. Alara greeted him with a forced smile, her eyes flickering towards the hidden cameras for reassurance. At first, everything seemed normal. Bennett regaled her with tales of his supposed business dealings, his lies flowing effortlessly. But Alara was ready, carefully steering the conversation towards his absences and suspicious behavior. "It just doesn't add up, Bennett," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Where have you really been all this time?" Bennett's eyes narrowed, and I could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. "Are you questioning me?" he growled, taking a menacing step forward. Alara held her ground, her chin tilted defiantly. "I deserve the truth. What have you been hiding from me?" That was the breaking point. Bennett exploded, unleashing a torrent of vile insults and threats. He admitted to his gambling debts, his desperation fueling his cruelty. And through it all, the cameras captured every damning word. As he ranted, I caught glimpses of Theo peeking out from his hiding spot, his eyes wide with fear. My heart ached for the innocent child, caught in the crossfire of his parents' toxic relationship. Finally, Bennett stormed out, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the walls. Alara collapsed to the floor, her body shaking with sobs. I rushed to her side, enveloping her in my arms. "It's over, sweetheart. You were so brave, and now we have everything we need to put that monster away for good." She clung to me, her tears soaking my shirt. "I was so scared, Mom, but you were right there with me, just like you promised." Pride and fierceness filled my heart. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, I would always be there to protect my family. Bennett's reign of terror had come to an end, and justice would be served. With the evidence secured, we wasted no time in contacting our lawyer. He assured us that Bennett's outburst, combined with the financial records and previous recordings, would be more than enough to build an airtight case against him. As I held Alara close, offering comfort and reassurance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious. The road to healing would be long, but with my family by my side, I knew we could overcome anything. With Bennett's incriminating outburst captured on video, the next step was to gather our allies and present the evidence. I knew we couldn't take on this battle alone. We needed all the support we could muster. Our first stop was Bennett's estranged brother, Marcus. Despite their strained relationship, I knew Marcus had been a victim of Bennett's manipulation and deceit in the past. When we arrived at his doorstep, Marcus greeted us with a guarded expression. "Delia." "Ronald, what brings you here?" I didn't mince words. "It's about Bennett. We have proof of his gambling addiction, his debts, and the threats he's made against our daughter and grandson." Marcus's eyes widened, and he ushered us inside. "Tell me everything." We laid out the evidence, the financial records, the recordings of Bennett's unhinged rants, and the video of his explosive confrontation with Alara. With each piece of damning evidence, Marcus's expression darkened. "That son of a bitch," he muttered, shaking his head. "I always knew he was capable of something like this, but to drag an innocent child into his mess? That's unforgivable." I could see the conflict playing out on his face, the lingering bonds of brotherhood clashing with the harsh reality of Bennett's actions. "Marcus, we need your help," I pleaded. "Your testimony could be the final nail in the coffin. With you by our side, we can ensure Bennett faces the consequences of his actions." Marcus was silent for a long moment, his jaw clenched. Finally, he met my gaze with steely determination. "Count me in. It's time that bastard paid for what he's done." With Marcus on board, our coalition grew stronger. Next, we reached out to our trusted family lawyer, setting up a meeting to present the evidence and discuss our legal options. The lawyer's expression was grim as he reviewed the recordings and documents. "This is a solid case," he said, his voice laced with disgust. "Bennett's admissions of gambling, debt, and threats against his wife and child are damning. We can hit him with charges of domestic abuse, financial fraud, and endangerment of a minor." A sense of relief washed over me. We were finally on the path to justice, and Bennett's web of lies was unraveling. "What's the next step?" Ronald asked, his hand gripping mine tightly. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, his gaze steely. "We'll file for an emergency restraining order against Bennett, prohibiting him from contacting Alara or Theo. Then we'll present the evidence to the district attorney and press charges." My heart raced at the prospect of finally putting an end to Bennett's reign of terror. "When can we begin?" The lawyer's lips curved into a grim smile. "Immediately. I'll have the paperwork drawn up by the end of the day. Bennett won't know what hit him." As we left the lawyer's office, a sense of determination surged through me. We had come so far, endured so much, and now the final confrontation was within reach. Marcus fell into step beside us, his expression resolute. "You know, Bennett always had a way of talking his way out of trouble, but this time he's bitten off more than he can chew." I nodded grimly. He made the mistake of underestimating the lengths a mother will go to protect her family. With our allies rallied and the legal wheels in motion, I felt a newfound sense of strength. Bennett's reign of fear and manipulation was nearing its end. Soon he would face the consequences of his actions, and my daughter and grandson would be free to rebuild their lives without the shadow of his toxicity looming over them. As we prepared for the final battle, I steeled my resolve. Bennett had pushed us to our limits, but he had also awakened a fierce protectiveness within me. A mother's unwavering determination to shield her loved ones from harm, no matter the cost. And in that moment, I knew without a doubt that we would emerge victorious. With the evidence stacked against him and our allies rallied, it was time to confront Bennett and put an end to his reign of terror once and for all. Our lawyer had arranged for a meeting at a neutral location under the guise of discussing a business opportunity. When Bennett arrived, his arrogant swagger was in full force. He greeted us with a smug grin, completely oblivious to the trap we had set. "Ah, Delia, Ronald," he drawled, his eyes lingering on Marcus with a flicker of surprise. "And my dear brother Marcus, what a pleasant surprise." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to wipe that smirk off his face. "Cut the act, Bennett. We know everything." His bravado faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." With a nod from our lawyer, Ronald pressed play on the video recorder, filling the room with the audio of Bennett's explosive outburst during his confrontation with Alara. Bennett's face drained of color as his own damning words echoed around us. He tried to protest, to spin his lies, but we were ready. "That's not all," Marcus spoke up, his voice laced with barely contained fury. "We have proof of your gambling debts, your shady financial dealings, and the threats you made against your own wife and child." One by one, we presented the evidence, bank statements, recordings, and eyewitness accounts. With each new piece of damning information, Bennett's facade crumbled further. "You're all delusional," he spat, desperation seeping into his tone. "You have no proof." That's when our lawyer stepped forward, a grim smile playing on his lips. "On the contrary, Mr. Archer, we have more than enough proof to bury you." He laid out the charges: domestic abuse, financial fraud, endangerment of a minor. The weight of Bennett's crimes hung heavy in the air, suffocating him with their gravity. For a moment, Bennett seemed poised to unleash another torrent of rage and lies. But then, movement caught my eye. A uniformed police officer stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on Bennett. "Bennett Archer, you're under arrest for the charges listed," the officer stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Bennett's eyes darted wildly, seeking an escape route. But he was trapped, surrounded by the weight of his misdeeds and the consequences he had brought upon himself. As the officer slapped the handcuffs on Bennett's wrists, I felt a surge of vindication. This was the moment we had been fighting for. The moment when justice prevailed and the monster who had terrorized my family was finally brought to his knees. Bennett tried one last desperate attempt to wriggle free, his mouth twisting into an ugly sneer. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his eyes burning with hatred. "I'll make sure you all pay." But his threats rang hollow, powerless against the strength of our united front. Marcus stepped forward, his expression a mask of disgust. "Save it, Bennett. Your lies and manipulation have reached their end. It's time you face the consequences of your actions." With those words, the officers led Bennett away, his protests fading into the distance. A heavy silence settled over the room, broken only by the sound of our collective breaths. Slowly, I turned to face my family, Ronald, Marcus, and our steadfast lawyer. Their expressions mirrored my own, a mixture of relief, triumph, and a newfound sense of freedom. "It's over," I whispered, the weight of those words sinking in. "He can't hurt us anymore." Ronald pulled me into a fierce embrace, his body trembling with emotion. "You did it, Delia. You saved our family." As I held him close, I allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious, our bonds strengthened by the fires of adversity. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, our family would face them together, united and unbreakable. With Bennett's arrest, a whirlwind of legal proceedings kicked into motion. Our lawyer worked tirelessly, ensuring that every charge stuck and that Bennett faced the full weight of his crimes. The fallout was swift and severe. As news of Bennett's deceit and abuse spread through our community, the reactions ranged from shock to outrage. Friends and acquaintances who had once been charmed by his charismatic persona now turned their backs in disgust. Bennett's once thriving business crumbled as clients and partners severed ties, unwilling to associate with someone of such reprehensible character. His financial empire, built on a foundation of lies and gambling debts, collapsed around him. Through it all, Alara remained steadfast, her courage and resilience shining through. With the restraining order in place, she was finally able to breathe freely, no longer living in fear of Bennett's threats or outbursts. "It's like a weight has been lifted," she confided in me one evening, her eyes shining with a newfound peace. "For the first time in years, I don't have to constantly look over my shoulder or choose my words carefully." I pulled her into a fierce embrace, overcome with pride at the strength she had displayed throughout this ordeal. "You're free, sweetheart. He can't hurt you or Theo anymore." As the legal proceedings continued, Bennett's desperation grew. He tried every tactic in the book, pleading, bargaining, even threats, but our case was airtight. The evidence, coupled with Marcus's damning testimony, painted a picture of a man consumed by greed and willing to sacrifice everything, including his own family, to feed his addictions. The day of Bennett's sentencing arrived, and the courtroom was packed with spectators eager to witness his downfall. Alara, Ronald, Marcus, and I sat together, a united front, our gazes fixed on the man who had once held us all in his manipulative grip. When the judge handed down the verdict, a lengthy prison sentence and hefty fines, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the room. Bennett's face contorted with rage, his mask of arrogance finally slipping as he realized the full weight of his actions. "You'll pay for this," he screamed, his voice echoing off the courtroom walls. "All of you, mark my words." But his threats fell on deaf ears. The judge ordered him removed from the courtroom, and he was dragged away, kicking and screaming like a petulant child, denied his way. As we filed out of the courtroom, a sense of triumph surged through me. We had faced down the monster and emerged victorious, our bonds strengthened by the fires of adversity. In the days and weeks that followed, Alara began the process of rebuilding her life. With Bennett's toxic influence removed, she blossomed, her laughter and warmth returning in full force. She poured her energy into her work and her son, Theo, determined to provide him with the stable, loving home he deserved. With our unwavering support, she navigated the divorce proceedings, ensuring that Bennett's rights to Theo were severed permanently. As for Marcus, his relationship with Alara and our family grew stronger. He expressed gratitude for our role in helping him break free from Bennett's manipulative hold, and we welcomed him with open arms, grateful for his unwavering support during our darkest hours. Slowly but surely, the scars left by Bennett's cruelty began to heal. The fear and uncertainty that had once clouded our lives dissipated, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and resilience. And through it all, I couldn't help but marvel at the strength of our family bond. We had faced the ultimate test, stared down the abyss of darkness, and emerged victorious. Bennett's reign of terror had been ended, and we were living proof that love, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice could conquer even the most formidable of foes. As I watched Alara and Theo play in the park, their laughter ringing out like music, I knew that our journey had been worth every struggle, every tear, and every moment of fear. We had reclaimed our lives, our happiness, and our future, and no one, not even the likes of Bennett Archer, could ever take that away from us again. In the aftermath of Bennett's sentencing, a strange sense of calm settled over our family. It was as if a dark cloud that had been looming overhead for years had finally dissipated, allowing the warmth of the sun to break through once more. Alara embraced this newfound freedom with a fervor that both inspired and humbled me. She threw herself into rebuilding her life, determined to create a safe and nurturing environment for Theo, free from the toxicity of his father's influence. I watched with pride as she poured her energy into her work, excelling in her career and providing for her son with unwavering dedication. The spark in her eyes, once dimmed by fear and uncertainty, now burned brighter than ever before. "I'll never let anyone hold that kind of power over me again," she declared fiercely one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on her patio. Bennett tried to break me, but in the end, he only made me stronger. Her words resonated deep within me, a reminder of the resilience and determination that had carried us through the darkest of times. We had faced down the monster and emerged victorious, our bonds forged in the fires of adversity. As the weeks turned into months, Theo blossomed under the loving care of his mother and our family. The shadows that had once haunted his innocent eyes faded, replaced by the carefree joy of childhood. "Grandma, look!" he squealed one afternoon, proudly displaying a finger painting he had created at preschool. "It's our family." I studied the vibrant swirls of color, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. This was the future we had fought for. A world where Theo could grow and thrive, untouched by the darkness that had once threatened to consume us all. Even Marcus, who had once been estranged from our family due to Bennett's manipulation, became a constant presence in our lives. He embraced his role as an uncle with a fervor that surprised and delighted us all. "You guys saved me too, you know," he confided one evening as we shared a beer on the back patio. "Bennett had me convinced that his way was the only way, but you showed me what true strength and loyalty really looks like." His words were a balm to my soul, a reminder that our battle had not only liberated Alara and Theo, but had also freed Marcus from the toxic grip of his own brother's lies. As the days turned into weeks and months, the shadow of Bennett's cruelty faded, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and purpose. Alara's laughter rang out freely, unencumbered by fear or uncertainty, and Theo's innocent giggles filled our home with a joy that had been sorely lacking. And through it all, I couldn't help but marvel at the strength of our family bond. We had faced the ultimate test, stared down the abyss of darkness, and emerged victorious. Bennett's reign of terror had been ended, and we were living proof that love, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice could conquer even the most formidable of foes. On the one-year anniversary of Bennett's sentencing, we gathered for a celebratory dinner, raising our glasses in a toast to our hard-won triumph. "To family," Ronald declared, his eyes shining with pride and love, "to the bonds that can never be broken, and to the courage that carried us through the darkest of nights." As we clinked our glasses together, a sense of peace washed over me. The nightmare was finally over, and we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges the future might hold, our family would face them head-on, unafraid and unbreakable. For we had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious, our love and determination burning brighter than any darkness that dared to cross our path. And as I looked around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I knew that this was the greatest victory of all, the reclamation of our lives, our happiness, and our unshakable belief in the power of family to overcome any obstacle.